Doctors and nurses have read it. Have you ever witnessed a couple have a child that was obviously not the father's? If so, what happened? My husband and I were visiting our friends who just had a baby. We are the godparents, and we were standing in the hallway talking to both sets of grandparents. Well, apparently the hospital has a rule that only 5 visitors may be present in the hallway. But the security guard had let all 6 of us in for some reason and we didn't realize it. This nasty nurse comes up to us, notes that there are 6 of us, tells us someone will have to leave immediately, and then turns to my husband and says, "Oh, are you the daddy?" Without missing a beat, he says, "That's what we're all trying to figure out here." She gets a look of horror on her face and backs away. Worked in the army hospital on FT Lewis. A woman came in for belly pain and we found out and told her she was 10 weeks pregnant. The husband at the bedside started laughing, grabbed his coat and left the room, explaining to us that he had been in Afghanistan until 3 weeks prior. He looked back at her and just said, "Well, that's that Brittany." I always liked how classily he left her while she just silently stared off into space. I had a vasectomy. While chatting with the doctor, he told me about another patient. This guy had 3 kids and came in for the snip because he and his wife decided they were done having children. The doc opened up his sack and found nothing to snip. This guy was born without the ability to have any children. The poor doctor had to explain to him what happened. Imagine finding that out that way. 23andMe posts a 25% off coupon 2 hours after this post goes up nut. One of my favorite cousins just did 23andMe with her dad and discovered that they were not biologically related at all. This is especially horrible because my aunt, her mother, is one of the most ridiculously zealous and judgmental people I have ever met. She screams at the baby cousins when they don't behave perfectly. She literally threw a pocket Bible at a woman in a grocery store after the woman was on the phone and searched tea or something. And she likes to send me unsolicited long letters about God's plan for my life. Surprisingly, her husband is the most fun and laid back person I've ever met. He did not deserve this. Or her. I learned about heteropaternal superfecundation from a friend of mine. She is a 5'0" blonde white girl introducing me to her 6'5" black twin. Surprises for everyone that day. Not in the hospital, but a friend and his GF were on again off again and she got pregnant. She swears it's his. He wants a paternity test. He moves in with her and her mom. She has the baby. Take the test. Test is taking a while to come back. Him and his family are over the moon with the baby. Kinda forget about it. Mentions it to GF's mom one day and she says, "Oh yeah. She didn't tell you? Came back a while ago. Totally your baby. Awesome. All is well." A few months later they're moving out and he finds the test in a box. Not his baby either. He left. Tried to stay in the baby's life but she wouldn't let him. He finds the test in a box. Why would you keep the damn test? Oh man. I'm so late to this thread. I used to work in the newborn nursery at a hospital. We got the babies right from delivery. Cleaned them up. Footprinted them. Checked vitals. Etc. Dads usually came in with the newborns. This dad comes in with this baby. Dad is white. Mom is white. Baby is very obviously not white. The dad was very quiet standing next to this baby, watching us clean it up. He says quietly, "I don't think this is my baby." You could tell he was absolutely devastated. We advised him not to sign the birth certificate until he was sure. Not sure what happened after we sent the baby back out to mom. But I felt awful for the guy. I can feel his sadness through the text. My best friend was dating a girl and knocked her up. They got engaged and planned to get married right after the baby was born. There were about 10 of us in the waiting room waiting for her to crank out the baby. It was essentially her parents. His were in another state. Some of her friends. And some of ours. After sitting there for about 2 hours, he walks out with a smirk on his face and says, "Let's go." We all thought something horrible had happened. Her friends asked how the baby is. And he said fine. But black. He motioned for us to go. So we followed him. In the parking garage. He tells us to follow him to his apartment. Then sends me a text asking I could put him up for a while. We literally moved him out of his apartment and into my spare bedroom in like an hour tops. Her parents didn't know who to be mad at. The confusion on their faces when he told them the baby was black was priceless. I was blood typing a newborn once. Mom was an O+. Baby was A+. Which is more or less not possible. I immediately panicked. Because Jesus God, they mixed up the babies. Someone has the wrong baby. We're gonna get sued. They're gonna have to genetic test the entire nursery. What if they subpoena me for being the idiot who discovered the problem? I don't have insurance. What if they sue me? After repeating the test 3 times, I called the floor and told them that they'd either drawn the wrong baby's blood, or they'd switched babies because mom couldn't be the baby's mother. Lol, no. It was a donor egg. The redraw matched fine. Everyone was where they were supposed to be. Oh god, my heart. Though. I work in anesthesia. One of my colleagues had someone vaginally deliver a baby with Steve's lunchbox tattooed above the birth canal. The OB-GYN said to the father after the delivery, "Congratulations, Steve." The guy replied that his name was indeed not Steve. Don't know if that counts. Due in 5 days. Never have cheated on my soap, but now I'm terrified. Thanks Reddit. I'm female and the pregnant one. Obviously. My wife is an RN hospital supervisor. Code yellow is the code over the intercom for security large male nurses needed. It rarely ever happens, but every now and then over the speakers you hear a code yellow. Labor and delivery. You know the reason. I'm not a nurse. My professor was an L&D nurse and she once saw a man running between 2 delivery rooms. Both women he had impregnated went into labor and gave birth the same day. Supposedly the one he was married to was angry because the woman he cheated with was impregnated after the wife but had her kid 10 minutes before the wife. L&D is apparently the most drama-filled section of hospitals. My so is planning to be a nurse and he's going to work in L&D neonatal this year, and I'm excited to hear any dramatic stories. My grandmother was a nurse. Once she was assisting with delivering a baby and the ostensible father commented that the child looked good for a premature baby. Without thinking, my grandmother told the truth. That baby is not premature. So I guess I know where I get my social obliviousness from. A coworker's aunt just found out her dad wasn't actually her dad. So she was really big into genealogy and had mapped out her family tree as far as she could go. She took one of those ancestry DNA tests about 2 months ago. And her father's side didn't line up with what she was expecting. In fact, she didn't recognize a single name that she was matched with paternally. She casually asked her dad if he knew any of the names. And he recognized the surname of the maintenance man at the apartment complex where he and his wife, aunt's mom, lived shortly after they had gotten married. Claimed he was a lousy repairman who always flirted with his wife, etc. Aunt's mom had passed away a few years ago. So she decided to not tell her dad the news. Had a lesbian couple come in. One of them was pregnant. Neither knew. Judging from all the screaming, this information was poorly received. Nurse here. Once had a couple come in. Just them. The father was black and the mother was white. The father was so involved. So ecstatic about him becoming a father for the second time with this woman. Nothing really seemed off. Until she started pushing. The baby girl came out completely white. Blonde hair and blue eyes. Usually black babies come out a little pale. But this was just straight out white. We had to escort the father out for fear of him becoming violent. But he just sat outside the room. On the ground with his face in his hands. That was one of the saddest moments I think I've ever seen with a father. Besides stillbirth. Odd thing after though. The mom didn't want the baby and wanted nothing to do with the father. Probably out of guilt. So she left the responsibility of this baby and their other 2-year-old boy to this man who didn't even question taking on this child. My brother was doing his AGIN rotation. His story is that in the first birth he assisted the woman had her husband leave the room. Seems odd these days, but he had the husband step out for the comfort of the patient. The baby is delivered and the color was not even close. Lily white parents and very black baby. She wants him to stay to talk to her husband who is about to come back and he bails on the whole situation. She was playing the odds all the way to the end. Had a college buddy whose fiancée was pregnant. They were the perfect couple. Both had just over a year with great careers starting out. Everything was butterflies and rainbows. Fast forward to the delivery room. They're in there and out comes a very black baby. He's quite the pale redhead. And she's a blonde blue eyes Texas girl. He made sure everyone was okay. Waited for her parents to arrive. And left without saying a word. He moved all his stuff out of the house while she was in the hospital. And cut off all communications with her. Just walked out of their lives in the most stone cold act I'd ever seen. They were together for 9 years. And he just left cold turkey. She tried to contact him at his job a few times. But he quickly moved up the ladder and eventually got a job in another city. He told me once that he took solace in the fact that her family had already dropped about $10K in a wedding that never happened. He's a gent for waiting for her parents. My son came out and looked really tan. My ex-girlfriend and I are pretty white. I thought for a second she cheated on me. We are now separated for different reasons unrelated to our child. And he is pasty white as hell. Got one heck of a suntan in the uterus though. I'm a nurse but this didn't happen to me. Friend of mine got pregnant in high school. She claimed it was our local doctor's son's kid so he agreed to deliver his grandchild for free. Child delivered and it was obviously half African American. Doctor's son and girl were both white. I think he still delivered it for free as he was relieved his 14-year-old son wasn't a dad. Edit. Forgotten apostrophe. The doctor didn't impregnate a teenager. It was supposedly his son's kid. LPT to avoid paying a $10K plus bill at the hospital. I'm too young to have witnessed it. But back in the late 50s or 1960, my uncle had an affair with a woman who later divorced her husband and became his wife. She had 2 children with her first husband, or at least that was the official story that everyone maintained. However, it was extremely obvious, based on appearance, that the second of my aunt's 2 children while married to her first husband was my uncle's biological child. She looked nothing like my aunt's first husband or her older half brother and exactly like my uncle. As the years went by, the pretense was dropped and was never mentioned again. Both my sons came out with barrel chests, red hair, and huge hands and feet. So they look exactly like me. My wife looks at them all loopy on drugs and says that's not my kid. The whole room went silent for a minute and then we bust out laughing. My wife has a wicked sense of humor. My sister got pregnant in high school and later met her now husband when she was 5 months pregnant. She is white and boyfriend is black. The baby daddy was white and not present. I was with our entire family, including my now brother-in-law, visiting the baby. My sister was still in recovery from her C-section. Brother-in-law picks up my niece. The nurse looks at him and says she should darken up in a few days. We all had a laugh. We knew he wasn't the father. But she didn't. I always wondered if she felt bad assumed adultery. They have 2 more girls together and he was able to adopt a 3 years later. Random note from the side of academia. This is why they don't do blood tests compared to your parents in my college, Marshall University, to teach basic genetics. Too many were finding out they didn't have any chance of being their father's child. I only heard the horror stories secondhand but the results spoke for themselves. Kinda off topic but I gotta give my friend credit for doing something I don't think I could ever do. Found out after being married and having a 3 and 1 year old his wife had been cheating on him. Multiple times. With multiple men. Everyone is white though so no obvious signs. Anyway, when he finds that there is the chance neither of the kids is his, he buys 2 paternity tests. He brought them home. But then the horrible conclusion hit him. He was prepared if they were his. He was prepared if they weren't. He had no f***ing idea what he would do if one was and one wasn't. So he threw tests away. They divorced. She keeps seeing people for short times and he is now remarried to a fantastic person. Not quite what you're asking, but in the same vein. I'm a nurse in a level 4 neonatal ICU. We service the sickest of the sick from our state and the surrounding states. So we see it all. We had a baby that was sick as snot. Lo and behold, we discovered its blood spinal fluid. ETC was septic with herpes. In most babies. We avoid this by treating the herpes while the mom is pregnant. In this case, the mom didn't even know she was a carrier. So where did it come from? This is the awkward and sickening moment when everyone in the room realized where the herpes came from. Turns out, the father had an affair and contracted the virus from his lover. So yeah. While this woman's baby is on the verge of death, she finds out her husband has been cheating on her and his cheatiness is the reason their baby is sick. Similar. But I don't know where else to put it because it just makes me laugh. My aunt is a nurse in the maternity ward. She had a couple come in where they were both very black. Lady has baby and it is white AF. Like. Totally pale. No trace of any pigment. They put the baby on her mom and the mom starts yelling about how this isn't her baby and they stole her baby. In all fairness, you can be very confused during after delivery. It wasn't stupidity. Just sobbing and freaking out, and the father is just sitting there and looks very confused because even he's realizing that even if she did cheat, there is no way the baby would be that white. The doctor and nurses are trying to assure her that this is her baby and the skin usually darkens later. Come to find out, when he called his mom, she pointed out that they have a second cousin who is albino and maybe baby got that gene. Turns out that's what happened, baby was albino. If you guys are enjoying this thread, you should watch Lauren Lake's paternity court on TV. My favorite case was one where the female spent almost the entire 25 minutes going over all this proof that the kid was his, using facial similarities, swearing up and down, and even bringing in witness attest that she was of good character and won't cheat. Even straight insulting the guy, saying how shitty it is he denies his child and won't grow up, etc. Through all of this, the guy just stood there quietly, not saying a word. Not defending himself. Nothing. Finally, the judge asks if he has anything to say or would like to plead his case. He motions to the only thing on the desk, a manila folder. Plaintiff takes it to the judge. She opens it, reads for a minute, then dismisses the case in the favor of the guy. Turns out he had been deployed overseas in Afghanistan during the year before and during the entire pregnancy and birth. He came home after 4 years and was introduced to his 2-year-old child. He started punching his wife and ripped out her IV, requiring stitches. It took 3 orderlies to subdue him. I work as an orderly in a hospital, but I wasn't one of the 3 who subdued him. I was told the story and I witnessed the aftermath. My brother's friend was in the army and had a shotgun wedding with a woman he had been dating for a few months. She's white American and he's white Hispanic. The baby came out black. Until the results came in, she was adamant that the baby was his. She even went to the extent of claiming he was getting her depressed and suicidal and was a bad father because he wouldn't claim his child. The results came back and she said the baby was his, and the paternity test revealed that was a lie. Pretty much she thought she was going to stay with him for that army money. And the paternity test revealed that was a lie. Read this is Maury's voice. Not a doctor. But my mother used to work in a medical lab many decades ago. One day, another woman who worked in the building was visiting the lab. And during the conversation, mentioned that she was blood type X. Her husband was type Y. And their child was type Z. I don't remember the specific types. One of the younger lab techs blurted out that's impossible. And the doctor in the lab just stared daggers at him. Luckily, the visitor either didn't notice or didn't care, and moved along shortly after. My mom still remembers it as one of the most awkward moments she'd ever been privy to. Obligatory not me but my great grandmother. Great granny grew up and lived in a very bad poor area of a city near a military base around World War I and World War II. In order to make ends meet, she became a prostitute. Our understanding is that she was very good at her job and therefore very popular with all the military men around. She did not care what you looked like or your skin color as long as you paid. Her first husband finally figured out that she was the infamous town hoe when her first kid came out very obviously mixed. They got divorced and she found a second husband that didn't mind it at first. One white child and 2 mixed babies later, they divorced. Repeat with 2 out of 11 known living kids being 100% white and a total of 5 husbands as well as several boyfriends and fiancés walking out on her. Stories are that the hospital staff used to make bets on how soon she'd be back and what mix, Black, Native American, Asian, Hispanic, etc. the kid would be that time.